Sasso, Rabbi of Congregation Beth-El Tzedek, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to this evening's program. I don't think we can begin tonight's program without attention to the turmoil that has affected our city and many others over the past few days. And looking beyond the protests and the intended and unintended violence is the damage done to the fabric of America's heart by abuses of law enforcement perpetrated against Americans of color in cities across the United States. For many of us, it is not possible to understand the pain, the despair, the anguish that suffocates so many of our Black brothers and sisters and other people of color. Racism is not just a series of actions. It is an ingrained way of thinking and of feeling. It is a habit of the heart, deeply written into our national psyche and history. So even as we decry the violence and bemoan the damages and losses of the past days, and we would have hoped for more peaceful solutions, let us remember that there are many George Floyds in our country, and many more who would think little of placing their boots on their throats for over 8 minutes. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. This is an expression that should be familiar to us. In the harbor of New York City, there is a statue at whose base a poem by a young 19th century American Jewish woman, Emma Lazarus, pleads, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free." The promise of the Statue of Liberty has not yet been fulfilled in America. Tonight, we will be talking about the impact of prejudice upon another sector of the American people, the LGBTQ+ community. So to this already complicated and painful time of COVID-19, we bring other issues. In a way, the pandemic sensitizes us to our own brokenness and to how much we need not only physical cure, but spiritual healing and mental therapy. A modern author reminds us, do not be dismayed by the brokenness of the world. All things break, and all things can be mended. Not with time, as they say, but with intention. So go, love intentionally, extravagantly, unconditionally. The broken world waits in darkness for the light that is you. That is written by a young woman, L.R. Nost. And then the Hasidic sage, Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kotsk, reminds us, there is nothing more whole than a broken heart. Knowing our brokenness is the beginning of repair and of redemption. Let repair start and let the healing begin. And now to our program. In recent years, June has become a month in which the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and allied communities celebrate their uniqueness and pride in their identities. Tonight, we hope to help members of the Beth-El Tzedek and of the Jewish community and beyond learn more about the LGBTQ+ community and learn how to be welcoming and supportive of the people who find themselves as members of both. We are grateful to the Jewish Community Relations Council for their endorsement and promotion of this program. We will have a panel of 3 leaders in the Indianapolis community who work with and for the LGBTQ and Jewish communities. Annette Gross of PFLAG, Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, will discuss the role of parents of the LGBTQ plus people. Aaron Welcher from the JCRC will speak about welcoming LGBTQ plus folks into Jewish spaces. And Han Jacobs Medway from the Jewish Federation of Greater Indianapolis will speak about navigating gender identity and trans issues, how they can intersect with Jewish spaces, and how Jewish communities can be inclusive. Our own Rabbi Jenny Greenspan will facilitate the conversation with our three guests. She will share their more complete bios in a few moments, asking each to speak for 10 to 15 minutes, and then there will be a Q&A period at the end of the program. Rabbi Jenny Greenspan first became passionate about LGBTQ inclusion in high school when one of her closest friends came out to her as transgender. She and another classmate began the GSA, or Gay Straight Alliance, at their high school in 2004. As an undergraduate at the University of California, Santa Cruz, Rabbi Jenny double majored in psychology and feminist studies and emphasized learning about gender and sexuality in human society and interactions. She was on her campus the LGBTQ Network's board representative, where she created a Pride Shabbat program and worked to ensure that the student healthcare plans covered for gender inclusive treatment, including mental health, hormonal treatments, and surgeries. As a rabbinical student, Rabbi Jenny ensured space for LGBTQ rabbinical students to come together, and she drafted a paper for her modern halakha class, stating the halachic imperative for all branches of modern Judaism to recognize, respect, and include all LGBTQ individuals as full members of the Jewish community. Rabbi Jenny Greenspan has been assistant rabbi and my dear colleague at Beth-El since July of 2019. It is my pleasure to have her tonight as our moderator, and I am delighted to turn the program over to her. Rabbi Jenny.
Thank you, Rabbi Dennis, for sharing the bio and for inviting me to lead and to moderate this conversation tonight. As you can hear, it's one that has been important to me for a long time. And I also want to thank Jackie Goldstein on our staff for partnering with me in the Keshet initiative to help work on our congregational involvement in making sure that we are welcoming community, and for doing more of the legwork than I did, I will admit, for gathering this panel this evening. So I just want to make sure that Jackie is also thanked. So we'll begin. I want to start out that we live in a world where it can be dangerous to be different, and that the more we learn about one another and about the other, the more we recognize that we're not so different, and the more we're able to start fulfilling the promise of Leviticus chapter 25, verse 35, of helping our brother or our sister live with us and truly be a sibling to us. So I want to thank us all for gathering, and thank all of our speakers before we even really dive in, for having the courage and being willing to speak with all of us tonight. So I want to say thank you, and thank you for helping us to tighten the spaces between people and to help make sure that we can all lovingly embrace our siblings. We will go through each, as Rabbi Dennis said, I'll introduce each of our three panelists and ask to share a little. I have a couple of pre-prepared questions, should they be useful, to help get the conversations going. And toward the end, we will indeed have time for questions and answers, either in the chat or we can unmute, but we'll get there. We'll start with Annette Gross. Annette Gross came to PFLAG 19 years ago, PFLAG being the Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, 19 years ago when her son came out as gay. The world was a different place back then, and she needed support and education in order to navigate this new information she received. Annette served on the Indianapolis PFLAG board in various capacities. She's been programming chair, membership chair, president, and vice president. She began to get involved with advocacy when the Marion County City Council was debating a human rights ordinance. She was involved with Freedom Indiana during the fight for marriage equality in Indiana, speaking out and testifying at the state Senate hearings. In 2015, after Governor Pence signed the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, she was instrumental in bringing 3,000 people to the State House in opposition to this discriminatory bill. Over the years, Annette has spoken on various panels, radio shows, and podcasts about PFLAG, LGBT advocacy, and how parents can best support their LGBTQ children. So I'm excited to turn over to Annette and explore how can parents best support their LGBTQ children, whatever else you can start to tell us.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. It's interesting because my journey with PFLAG has a Jewish component, and the formation of PFLAG has a Jewish component. PFLAG was formed in 1972 by a woman named Jeannie Mansford, who learned from a hospital telephone call that her son had gotten beat up by the police when he was handing out pamphlets about a dinner that the gay community was having. So she wrote a letter in response to the New York Post, and then she marched in the Christopher Street Gay Liberation Day parade. And she just carried a simple sign, a homemade sign that said, "Parents of gays unite." And when it was over, the parade was over, people came up to her, gay and lesbian people came up to her, and they said, "Will you talk to my parents? Will you talk to my parents?" Because no one had ever done that before. A parent had never done that before. So she started having meetings in her living room, and eventually, you know, the whole idea spread. It went national. I believe the first president of PFLAG, National PFLAG, was also a Jewish woman. And today we have over 300 chapters around the country, and there's about 10 chapters here in Indiana. I learned that, parents don't have to understand what their children are going through technically. They just have to be there to love them and support them. And PFLAG gave me that opportunity because, again, when my son came out in 1998, people weren't talking about gay issues. You didn't read about it in the paper a whole lot. Marriage was not even being talked about back then. And I didn't have the language. I didn't know what to say. So I met other parents who had navigated that world, and it gave me strength. And it was kind of like a progression. Parents have to come out of the closet too. And parents are always coming out of the closet because you're routinely explaining things to people. As parents, you sit around and it's, "Oh, is your son married? Oh, who's his wife? Blah, blah, blah." And it's kind of like a Groundhog Day kind of thing. We're doing this over and over and over again. So I just needed the strength to do that. So that was kind of the beginning of my entry into PFLAG. And then, like Rabbi Jenny said, in 2005, Indiana Quality came to PFLAG and asked for 2 parents to join a coalition. Oh, I met Margot. I met Margot at that coalition. And we went down to the city council to speak to legislators down there, city councilors, and it gave me my first taste of what real discrimination was like against the LGBT community. I saw ministers get up and say the most horrible things I'd ever heard, and it just appalled me. And then later on with the marriage issue, I remember Rabbi Dennis standing behind me in the State House and speaking out. It was just mind-boggling. So it's really joyful to see the Jewish community stepping up and doing all of this work, because 20 years ago, we weren't at that place. And, it's not that it was anybody's fault, but again, it was a progression and we had to get to that place. So I'm just grateful that we are participating in Pride. That was a big dream of mine. The first year that we marched with the Jewish community was very overwhelming to me. So I had my foot in the gay community, and then I had my foot in the Jewish community. So it was really wonderful. Now, about PFLAG itself, we have meetings once a month. Right now we're meeting on Zoom because we can't meet in person, but we meet in the same building that the JCRC is in, on 42nd in Michigan, in the offices of a group called Gender Nexus. And that's an organization that was created for the transgender and non-binary community. And it's kind of like, I would imagine like an AA meeting. We sit in a circle, everything that is said is confidential. We don't repeat anything outside of the meetings. And parents and LGBT people can come there and share their stories, share their feelings, ask questions, and get resources. So we just had our meeting an hour ago on Zoom. So I guess that's my story for now, yeah.
And I'm going to actually share a picture very quickly of Annette and the local Indianapolis. I found an even better one. I love this, of our PFLAG.
Yeah, we wore that flag. I think that was 2015, and we led off the parade. The woman in the green is my friend Jan. She's the president of our chapter now. And if you can see, we wore that flag as like a costume. It was amazing.
Wonderful, thank you.
I would like to add one thing, by the way. I apologize. National PFLAG, in 2007, National PFLAG realized that the LGBTQ community needed the help of straight people in their fight for equality. And they created a program called Straight for Equality. And it's on their website. You can go onto the website and learn how to advocate for the LGBTQ community. You don't have to have a gay child. You don't have to be LGBTQ, but it gives you resources. And then they also branched out. They have Straight for Equality in faith communities, Straight for Equality in healthcare, and Straight for Equality in the workplace. So, and all of these resources can be downloaded for free. So if you just go to PFLAG or just even Google Straight for Equality, you can find those resources.
Amazing. And Jackie is putting our links to those resources in our chat. So any following along, if you want to click on those links to chat in the chat to bookmark them, you'll be able to find them as well.
And you're all invited to meetings, by the way. Anybody's invited to a meeting.
Yes, the Friends is in that acronym as well, right?
Well, you know what? They changed it. It used to be, actually what it was parents, friends, and families of lesbians and gays. But now they just call it PFLAG because of the bisexual and transgender. So they don't want to leave anybody out. So now it's kind of like I say Coke. You know, you say Coke, you know it's Coca-Cola. So PFLAG is PFLAG.
For all aspects of the LGBTQ plus community.
The whole rainbow, yeah.
So it sounds to me like one of the main emphases of PFLAG is really helping allies to be allies.
It's part of it, yeah. Our mission is support, education, and advocacy. So I told you about the support. Education would be things like we go into businesses, like we speak at places like Dow, RCI, Lilly, Cummins, and they all have diversity groups, and we speak to those groups. We've spoken at all the colleges and universities. We speak to counseling students, psychology students, nursing students, social work students, teachers, anybody, actually anybody who invites us. And then the advocacy obviously is speaking out.
And that work that you did with the State House and stuff. Amazing. And I suppose my one question before we move to the next stage is what do most parents need first? How does PFLAG help a new parent arriving? What do most parents, most siblings, maybe new people who are in the situation you may have been 20 years ago, first learning about a family member, what do they need first so that they can best be a family member to their family member?
They need resources. And it's kind of interesting because right now, what we're seeing is more parents who come to PFLAG have transgender kids. What I've found is that the parents who have gay, lesbian, and bisexual kids obviously are younger and they're more enlightened. And again, the world is a different place. So they're more, and the internet makes a big difference, you know. So the parents of LGB kids don't need as much help. I mean, there are parents who do, obviously, but not in overwhelming numbers. So most of the parents who come right now have transgender kids. They need resources. They need names of doctors, counselors, other groups that can support their kids and their families. So we provide those resources. And they just need to talk. You know, it's a safe space, and they ask questions. They just need to know that they're not alone.
They're seeking community for themselves as well.
Yeah. I mean, as far as I go, PFLAG has become a family to me. You know, nationally, I have friends all over the country from PFLAG chapters. We go to conventions every 2 years. And I've met people all around the country. So it's an amazing resource because we can help the people who have been where we were years ago. So it's a kind of a twofold thing.
So many journeys. That's the important part, is knowing where to find your community, where to find your resources, who can be an advocate for you, and knowing where to find someone who has walked that path before you have, so that they can hold your hand on the path.
Well, it made me feel so much better because honestly, when my son came out, I felt like I didn't have, laughingly, what I call a normal family, which of course there is no such thing, but I didn't know that. So, you know, I felt like I was alone. I couldn't talk about it. I was embarrassed. And it just gave me a lot of strength. And literally, if you picture someone coming out of the closet slowly, 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 and now I'm way out of the closet. So, you know, it's empowering. It's very empowering. It's kind of like when somebody dies, you know, you wake up in the morning and your first thought is, oh my God, that person's not here anymore. And that's kind of how it was when my son came out. I would wake up in the morning and my first thought was, oh my God, my son is gay. And it took me a few months to get over that. And now I can honestly say I am grateful I have a gay child.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Annette. And we will have time for others to add any more questions or add any last words in a little bit, but I want to make sure we hear from our other two panelists as well. So thank you very much, Annette, for starting us off and figuring out how, for many of us are allies, and not all of us, many of us may be a part of the LGBTQ plus community, and many of us are hoping to be advocates and allies, and some of us may be part of the community in one way and allies to a different part of the community. So it's always important to know where we can reach out and find our resources for ourselves. We're going to move to our next panelist. We will move to Aaron Welcher, who has been a lifelong member of the Indianapolis Jewish community. Aaron earned his Bachelor of Science in Public Affairs with a major in Law and Public Policy and a minor in Educational Policy from Indiana University in Bloomington. While at IU, Aaron was heavily involved in leadership and network management across many organizations. I think he still does that. He served as his fraternity's vice president of external affairs and on the Riley Development Committee for IUDM. Aaron has been a development intern at both JCRC and at IU Hillel. He has also worked for IU's Student Life and Learning Office as the Greek Education Coordinator, where he brought leadership development, roundtables on risk management, sexual assault prevention training, alcohol and drug abuse intervention, and mental health awareness training programs to the Greek community. And prior to working at the JCRC, Aaron worked part-time for previous US Senator John Donnelly and the Jewish Federation of Greater Indianapolis. Aaron strives to create a stronger, open dialogue amongst the many diverse communities and industries in Indianapolis. And I am thrilled to welcome Aaron and to just tell us a little bit about welcoming LGBTQ community members into specifically Jewish community spaces. What does that look like when we have the intersection of identities and making sure that our Jewish spaces are welcoming to all?
Yeah, you know, and obviously with everything that has happened the last couple of days, I've really been thinking about what this means. So I think inherently a big part of it means that we have to start also being strong allies by learning about LGBTQ plus history. And I think that it's really important for us to reflect upon that. And I know Rabbi Dennis mentioned this earlier, and Rabbi Jenny when we were talking earlier too, that the LGBTQ plus community, our history is based in protest and in riot. And so, sorry, and the same is true with, sorry.
Do a background noise quieting moment, a reality of the Zoom era that we find ourselves in.
We will resume.
There we go.
I'm so sorry. But yeah, so it's really important that we end this moment to really reflect upon that our history is based in protests and riots. And in fact, that the Jewish community inherently has always been a part of that movement too, for the liberation of LGBTQ plus people. Some of the very founders were standing alongside their the people of color who led our community. So I just really wanted to take a moment to really reflect on that, and I think Han might have a couple of things he wants to say too on that, and we're happy to discuss this too at the end when there's questions, so it doesn't have to just be framed around the Jewish community. So when I came on to staff in the JCRC, I was lucky to be welcomed to a staff that wanted to be very inclusive, to a community that wanted to be open and include us more. So we've been working over the last couple of years to really try and focus on what it means to build inclusive spaces within the Jewish community. Obviously, there's just making sure that people know you are welcome to come in, to make sure that there aren't policies that are harmful to LGBTQ plus people. But I think what we also need to think about when we're creating open spaces is that we need people to be leading these conversations who are LGBTQ plus. Just like we need to for any other parts of our community. When we think about the Russian Jewish community and the needs that they need, are Holocaust survivors, we need to make sure that these things that we're doing to benefit the people we're trying to actually benefit are helpful. So the first thing I think that really needs to be done is we need to look at our organizational leadership. You need to look at your boards, at your who's interacting with your team leadership, all these things, because if you're not seeing LGBTQ plus people in those roles, then you're not going to be able to actually create fully inclusive spaces. And if you're finding that you can't find anyone that's LGBTQ plus, that means that there's a larger problem of why you can't find them, because it's not the they don't exist. It was estimated, and this was a rough estimate when we did our community survey in 2017, that there was probably about 8% of Indianapolis households that had someone who identified as LGBTQ plus in their household. The number could possibly be higher for a number of reasons too. So we have the population here, so we need to make sure that we're seeing that present. I think the other big thing that we really need to think about when we're doing spaces, and it's something that actually Annette and I talk a lot about, is that our identities as LGBTQ plus people are not political. There's a lot of obviously politics that have gone into making sure that we're able to live full, healthy lives, but inherently our identity isn't political. And so when you think about making spaces, make sure that you aren't trying to, really think about that you're choosing a political side. This is about making sure that you're welcoming people for their humanity. So I think. That's at least I'll open with that.
Thank you. So when you, I'm pausing on the remembering that our identities aren't political. I think that many of us may feel that as Jews, regardless of whether or not we also identify as LGBTQ plus, that often Jews can get lumped together, and that we wouldn't want our Jewish identity to be considered inherently political, and to remember that parallel is a really important reminder. Thank you. I suppose the one question I would add now is when you're saying we want to make sure that we are visibly welcoming, there are certain things that any given program or any given opportunity that we're coming together as a community, we can make sure is a signal. Often it's easy as human beings to say, well, I know I'm not opposed to something, but that doesn't necessarily read to somebody else that I'm open and welcoming to something. Do you have ideas to kind of help us bridge that gap?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think that oftentimes when we're trying to be inclusive, we overlook actually the comfort level of the people we're trying to include. So I go back to my first, really the first thing is to make sure that you have LGBTQ plus people in these spaces. That's probably number one. Let's kind of play, like we can't find LGBTQ plus people in this space. How do we even start? Some of the biggest things that we can do is start with forms that we have in our congregations, signage that we have in our congregations, things that you may not be able to necessarily see if you're not LGBTQ plus, but that we see right away when we walk into a space. It makes us feel safe. I think also just kind of just like how we fight any other form of bigotry, education is so pivotal, and really looking at resources. And luckily, we do have a lot of great resources throughout our community, the Jewish community, for this, from Keshet to A Wider Bridge, to many just great leaders within individual communities. There's a lot of great leaders now who are on Twitter and social media, who are Jews of color and who are queer, and they're leading some of the forefront conversations of the Jewish community, and a number of areas. And I think that's another thing I want to stress too, is to be inclusive. We don't want to just have your LGBTQ plus people members talking about LGBTQ plus issues all the time. We also want to make sure that we're uplifting them as experts in the other fields that they're passionate in. So I think those are some of the really big areas that we can be inclusive in. I don't want to speak for everyone, and that's something I've learned a lot as I get more involved in organizing within the LGBTQ plus community. But for me personally, I am also okay with a lot of questions being asked. Not everyone is going to like this, but sometimes, I think that we need to ask these questions so that we can learn. So if you can create a space within your congregation or organization that allows for these questions to be asked and answered respectfully also goes a long way.
More opportunities for open conversations. And
Now you can see why I work at the JCRC.
and I think you mentioned a wider bridge, and I know at some point you had marked that you might want to tell us a little bit about the work that that organization does. Do you want to give a quick, couple sentences?
Yeah. So a wider bridge is a organization that does advocacy work for the LGBTQ plus community, both here and in Israel. We brought them in February, and it was a great experience, and they do a lot of great work, and it's been really great to build that partnership with them because they also are really there on the ground fighting for rights for all Israeli LGBTQ plus people, and they, to the best of their ability as an organization, they also work for LGBTQ plus people who are Palestinian.
And so they're working in one of the few places in the Middle East where it's at least somewhat safe to be an LGBTQ plus person. So it's an important organization too. And I'll give our last speaker a moment to do an open, and then we can open for further questions from everyone else and anything else that any of you may want to say. So I'll introduce now, thank you, Aaron, so much, and I'll introduce now Han Jacobs-Medway. Han joined JFGI in March 2019, so you've been in your position just a few months longer than I have been in mine, after serving as Associate Director of Social Responsibility at the Jewish Federation of Greater Philadelphia. While there, he also managed the Northeast NORC, the Naturally Occurring Retirement Community. He served on the leadership committee of Gen Philly, a group of aging professionals, and as co-chair of the LGBT Elder Initiative Board in Philadelphia. Han received his BA in American Studies from Smith College, a JD from Drexel University, and his master's in social service from Bryn Mawr College. He lives with his husband, AJ, their 2 dogs, and an Angora rabbit. Ooh, they're soft. In his free time, he enjoys running, knitting, and travel. I'm also a knitter, so it's a pleasure to introduce Han. Han's going to share a little bit about the trans and the gender-specific segments of the LGBTQ plus community, and how we can make sure that we are, when welcoming, we're welcoming to all aspects of the community. So Han, go for it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I just want to, thank both Lynette and Aaron for everything they've said so far. Rabbi Jenny, the wonderful introduction and framing that I think you've given us, and Rabbi Dennis for your opening remarks. Wanted to sort of start by saying, we've said LGBTQ plus a lot, and that's a big umbrella, right? So that's a big umbrella with a lot of identities there included. In fact, it's so big that we had to add a plus to it because it is big, right? It needs to keep getting bigger to really embrace the fact that lots of people's identities are aligned and are similar, but are not necessarily the same. And that, I think that's something that, in Jewish communities, we certainly understand, right? That not every Jewish community looks monolithic, right? We have lots of different types of Jewish communities, but we sort of all come together around very specific pieces and things that make sense. But we also have other identities. We also have other aspects of our lives that maybe we think about more specifically at various times than others. I also wanted to sort of raise up the idea that, transgender also is an umbrella term, right? There's lots of different identities around gender identity that are sort of included in that. And so when we start sort of saying LGBTQ plus, or we start saying trans communities or trans identities, right? Lots of those things are actually multifaceted, not homogenous in terms of how people identify or live their lives or experience the world, right? Or experience their communities. And, that gender, I think I want to sort of pull apart just a little bit is that and I'm going to do the gender identity as opposed to sexual orientations each in, on one foot. But this is that gender identity is around how people experience their gender, whether that's masculine, feminine, how they express their gender, how they internalize their gender, what that looks like in terms of their life. Sexual orientation is around attraction and pieces around relationship and sexuality, right? And those things are similar but not the same. And so we have lots of different, aspects around this community that are similar but not the same. And when we talk about trans communities especially, and gender variant communities, the issues that gender variant folks are facing, especially in Jewish spaces, may not look the same as cisgendered queer folks. So cisgender being non-trans identified LGBT folks. So in Jewish spaces, we have lots of gendered practices, both halachically and just in terms of tradition. And, we also have a very, very gendered language in Hebrew. And so ways in which people are navigating their identity or how they express their gender in Jewish community can be really complicated, right? So I'll use a personal experience, which was that when I transitioned, the synagogue that I grew up in was very, very uncomfortable when the rabbi, when I had an aliyah, I was given an aliyah of a chagbah, of lifting the Torah, which in the community that I grew up with was a male activity, right? Men lifted the Torah, women dressed the Torah. That was the tradition of the aliyot.
Sounds familiar to me, I think.
Yeah, no one's seen that tradition before. So after I had transitioned, I was given an aliyah to lift the Torah. I will also say that it was a Saturday morning service in a relatively small, aging congregation. I was probably physically the only person who could do so safely. But the rabbi was very, very upset because he had known that I had grown up and had been bat mitzvahed as a girl in that congregation. And that was very upsetting to him, right? That I was that I was then included in this Jewish tradition that was considered very gendered. So, there's lots of experiences of, thinking through how people navigate or change in various environments when they experience, what we think of as, well, this is the tradition, this is how we do things here. And so, I think one of the things that Aaron was sort of mentioning earlier was about what we do in terms of how we welcome folks, right? That welcoming folks doesn't just look like, having a rainbow sticker on a door. Sometimes it also looks like how we invite folks into our practices, even without necessarily sort of making a big deal of it, right? Sometimes just engaging people in the way that they, would wish to be engaged, right, is a huge step towards how we think about welcoming practices. So, yeah, I think I'll probably leave it there. I feel like I sort of was on a soapbox for a moment. But and I want to give lots of folks chances for questions.
I'm like, I gave you a soapbox. That's good. I suppose the one I want to just call attention to, I see that at least a couple on this call are doing it, and I'm seeing more and more in Zoom calls. Can you speak for just a second on the importance of identifying the pronouns that you want used, that people might want used? You'll notice I did it on mine as a demonstration of the, if any haven't noticed it, it might be a little bit long because my name and title together are quite long. But over in the participants' backs, I've put she, her, hers as the pronouns that I prefer using when people are going to refer to me in the third person. And I'm wondering if any of you would want to help speak to when that's helpful and when and why someone might do that. I think, Han, I say you did it as well, but.
Sure, yeah.
But I'm not to put you on the spot as the one to talk about it, but
I'm happy to do so. So, when people will introduce themselves, one way to sort of show that you are thinking about how people identify and respecting their identities is often when I'm introducing myself, I'll say, "Hi, I'm Han. I use male pronouns, or I use he, him pronouns," and whatever else as part of my introduction, in terms of how that can then create a culture that says, not everybody's gender is actually or gender identity is necessarily how they present. It's not necessarily how you would imagine, just by looking at somebody. That person knows their experience and knows how they wish to be addressed. And so it's a way to say that, I see you and respect you and respect to address you the way you wish to be addressed. So, it can be a little awkward the first few times to sort of set that stage, but it can be a really sort of welcoming way to say, this is a value that we have in terms of making sure that we respect each other, and we respect how each other wish to be identified in this space.
Yeah, and I'll note that as someone who's I don't think, except maybe if I drove in a way that was not necessarily to the other drivers on the roads liking, I've likely never had someone use the wrong pronouns when referring to me, but I know for me, it's something that I want to do to make sure that it doesn't feel awkward for those of us who are often used to expecting that, okay, you look at me and people will assume to use she, her, hers. But if I have found the more I'm willing to own that, the more it's easier and more open for everyone to get to own it. And as Han said, we can trust others to own their own experiences. Thank you. At this point, I would love to open for any questions for any or all of our three panelists. We can put them into the chat to start, and I can help coordinate some questions. And to if any want to start, kick us off, that's fine. And we can go from there. And or if there are any other resources to put into the chat that any of our community might know about, this can be a moment to be sharing. I see Annette's got a...
I just want to let you know, I put the web links to the websites to PFLAG and Indy PFLAG in the chat room.
So
Yeah, I think, oh, sorry. Okay, so off of Han's point earlier, just one thing as we're also I'm going back to the creating inclusion and welcoming spaces. We also have to remember that there's a bunch of different demographics, like Han had mentioned, within the LGBTQ plus community. It's really an umbrella, but that doesn't just expand to the actual letters, but we also have to, there's a whole demographic of age and where people come from and their experience with religion and etc. So I think that's also very important to think that no one LGBTQ person has the same experience, and so it's important as you think about maybe programming, even some of your adult programs for 50 plus, of how actually inclusive are they for 50 plus people who are LGBTQ plus, and maybe that means you have to look at some programs. And I know that a really good example is looking at how, and this is some work actually a Wider Bridge is doing in Israel, but looking at retirement homes and how they're actually being inclusive of LGBTQ plus people as they're retiring. So I think that's also very important.
Can I throw out as a question? I remember it being pretty tumultuous, I'll pick as a word, when I was an undergraduate, with the use of the Q in our acronym, the use of the word queer, that as Erin brings up, generational can be a divisive term within the larger community. If anyone has any feedback on it, has that shifted in your continued more ear to the ground part of the community, to the community? Anything you might want to, any responses to the word queer?
I'll jump in for a second, which is, I think, you know, certainly historically, you know, and I have worked for many, many years with older adults who identify as LGBT. And for many folks, being identified as queer is still seen as a slur, and was a very harsh sort of use of language that they experienced very much as being slurred. In the 80s, during the HIV and AIDS crisis, queer was really reclaimed as a political term to really address some of this umbrella, right, in terms of different folks who identify as being parts of these communities. And so for, you know, really since the 80s, queer has been very much a political identification as well. And often includes both folks who are sort of gender nonconforming, gender variant, and or folks who may identify as LGBT. So, you know, it can sort of be a little broader, which I think politically can be really useful, right? So Erin sort of mentioned, you know, that being LGBT is not necessarily a political identity. I would argue being queer is a political identity. And that's not necessarily bad, right? That's just a way to start to think about ourselves. The other piece that I'll sort of raise around a Q is that in more recent years, another Q that's been added is questioning, right? And that especially for youth or for folks who maybe are asexual or maybe, you know, sort of are in other areas around the gender or sexuality spectrums, you know, that they know that they feel like a part of this community and feel connected in some way, but don't necessarily know exactly what that identity might be. So that's a different cue that's sometimes also included that I wanted to sort of throw in as well. So I think, you know, to Rabbi Jenny, to your question about, in terms of, I think queer is often age related, right? So many older LGBT folks feel really uncomfortable with it, but many younger folks actually feel really empowered by it.
Yes, that sounds consistent with what I remember seeing, what I wanted to hear if that's similar. I see we have a couple of questions in the chat. First from Margot is, what does the word ally mean to you? I'm not sure if that's directed at anyone in particular, but I suppose what is needed if someone were to want to be an ally, so what does it mean to you, or to what you would want in an ally, in any sense on how to be an ally to others. For anyone, Margot says. What does ally mean to you? Nat?
Well, again, getting back to PFLAG, you know, they created the Straight for Equality, so people who, you know, oh, okay, let me back up. When I first came to PFLAG, I remember there was a man there who came to meetings. He did not have a gay child, and I could not for the life of me understand why he was there. Because in my mind, PFLAG was for parents who were struggling, and it just blew my mind that this man was there, and I was suspicious of him. I just couldn't understand why he was there. And over the years, I learned that he cared about the community. He had made friends. He and his wife had made very good friends with a lesbian couple, and they felt bad about what was happening in our state. So they came to PFLAG to learn and to support this couple. So, you know, when we had the fight for marriage, again, I go back to Rabbi Dennis. He was there. He was always there. You know, we need people like that because we need numbers. In my mind, we need numbers. And, you know, I have a dog in the fight because my son is gay. Not everybody has a gay LGBTQ relative, let's say. Maybe more people do than not, but not everybody does. So we need those people to stand up and say, this is wrong. What you're doing is wrong. The community needs our support. So that's what I think of as an ally.
If either of the others want to respond, it's okay. I know I personally, in any time I am attempting to be an ally, I personally try very hard not to have ally be my own identity, but rather the action that I am trying to involve myself in. That I don't want to lean back on identifying as an ally, and therefore I should get brownie points just for being an ally, but that ally is a verb. And I think that's what we're trying to do together tonight. So I want to say thank you for everybody coming tonight to start with learning, because that's one of the first actions that any ally would need to do. Another question here in the chat.
Oh, if I could just real quick, and I think that was a beautiful definition, Annette. Thank you. I think just one thing that I want to add to what it means to be an ally. I think, and this again applies across the spectrum, not just to the LGBTQ plus community and our relationship and building inclusion, but I think resilient listening is key to being an ally. And making sure that you're actually listening to the people at the heart of the community who you're trying to support. A lot of times when we're trying to be well-meaning allies, we're trying to prove it so much that we can accidentally do more harm than good. So we want to make sure that we lead by listening when we're an ally.
I just want to totally echo that, and I sort of to Rabbi Jenny's point as well. I think one other piece about being an ally is being willing to be wrong, and willing to be vulnerable, and to acknowledge when we've made a mistake. That it's okay to get somebody's pronoun wrong. You say I'm sorry, and then you do better, and that's how you learn, and it's also how you move forward and you acknowledge a mistake or a misstep. You apologize, and then work to improve. That's, I think, the biggest thing that we can ever do.
Yes, thank you. The heart of being an ally is that we can make mistakes, but in the end of the day, we shouldn't try to be the focus as the ally. Thank you. The other question in the chat, and then we will wrap up because I know we are at we're approaching an hour since we've been talking. We're about an hour since the start of the time was set to start. The other question is, how do you see the restroom question being resolved? And are unisex restrooms a good resolution? I'll let anyone go.
Okay, I'll jump in if nobody else wants to. Sorry, I feel like I'm talking a lot. If somebody please feel free to jump in after.
No, the perfect amount.
So having gender neutral restrooms is actually hugely important for lots of folks as a safety measure. Making sure that people can safely access spaces that frankly we need to use as humans in public buildings is really important. Certainly that's a big piece. I'll say, I'm not entirely sure sort of the framing of the question, but I'll, in terms of a question or an issue, if there's a problem, right? If there's a problem around, if somebody needs to go to the bathroom, they should go to the bathroom that they need to go to. And it's not on sort of an organization or a congregation to be the bathroom police, right? People can choose the bathroom that they need to walk into and use. And certainly having single stall restrooms, having restrooms that are accessible not only for gender variant folks, but also that are accessible around people's needs around disabilities. Having bathrooms that are accessible for families with young children to be able to use bathrooms that way. Those are all sort of accessible spaces, and those spaces are often the same, right? They're often when we set up buildings that can be accessible, we often think about accessibility broadly. And that can be a really interesting, important way to be thinking about space and how it can help, frankly, everybody in the community.
Yeah, and I'll add, kind of taking it from for a personal experience, and I know that there are a lot of people, and I support it for all the reasons that Han just listed, but for me personally too, there's actually a lot of trauma across, I would say, the LGBTQ plus community that's come from bathrooms and gyms, and even still to this day, just from bullying and things that happened throughout our childhood. That I think that even still, when I go to new places that I'm not familiar with, I feel more comfortable in a restroom that it is private, and that's because of, like I said, the trauma that we face. So I think that that it's important for us to realize that it goes beyond just again a political issue, which I think people have tried to turn it into to a human one, and that there are real feelings and needs attached to this.
But the need for a restroom needn't to be politicized if it's just available for everyone to be able to have the access to have the bodily functions that we all have as humans, to be all of us able to take bio breaks. We do have a couple of our smaller restrooms at Beth-EL are marked as gender neutral, and if anyone who needs doesn't know where in the building they are, I would be happy to be a safe person to come ask and tell where exactly those are to find. I remember traveling with students who need, and it's not easy to have to be the one who's waiting much too long to get to just be a human. So yes, thank you. One other quick question, and then I will indeed let us wrap up. It's the last question here. Is any outreach being done to kids by any of the organizations that any of you are involved in, or if you know of, just making sure that kids, we can help find the kids who need our help, who are struggling with sexual orientation and identity or gender identity. Annette, I think you mentioned Gender Nexus as a resource for children, but is there anything?
It's not just for children, it's for anybody. As far as youth go, Indiana Youth Group services kids from, I think, 12 to 21. Obviously, they're not open right now. They have a new building. They're much larger than they were, but they have programs. They have all different sorts of things, groups for the kids. They get grants. So they've been established. They've been around almost 30 years, and they're almost one of a kind in the country. So they're very well respected, and we call it IYG. It's Indiana Youth Group. So that would be for the younger kids. And then the schools, like you mentioned, have the Gay Straight Alliances. As PFLAG parents, we used to go and speak to a lot of them. They're after school clubs. They have to be sponsored by a teacher. And that's another way for straight kids to support their LGBTQ friends. And maybe Aaron or Han know other groups that I'm not mentioning.
Yeah, so I'll say a couple other ones. I know that that there are, we do a lot with JCRC. We did a teen program with A Wider Bridge in February, which was really well. And we're starting to work more with my coworker, Marla Topiel, who's our Israel and Anti-Semitism Education Coordinator, but she does a lot of programming with our teens. She has been looking at ways to really try and innovate her programming to also incorporate this aspect. So it's exciting to get to work with her on these things. But then outside of the Jewish community, IWG is a great resource. There's also a new place that's open called Trinity Haven, and it is an important safe home for is it all, Han, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but all LGBTQ plus youth who need housing.
Yeah.
And it's something that we haven't said actually during this, but if you went to the housing crisis conversation that we had a couple months ago for the Cocktail Judaism, we touched upon this, but one of the highest homeless population is LGBT youth. So Trinity Haven is a great organization to support.
And I'll just add on the Jewish side that, we've mentioned Keshet, and Rabbi Jenny and Jackie and Annette are all part of our cohort here as a leadership project with Keshet. That's part of the national program. But Keshet also does a lot of work with youth. They do Shabbaton on a regular basis and work with youth and connect youth who are Jewish and LGBT identified across the country. There's also an organization called JQY. They're based out of LA, but they also work with youth and have sort of Jewish frames around youth work. And I'll also mention Eshel, which is specifically focuses on the Orthodox community and LGBT families and youth in the Orthodox community. So there's certainly, lots of excellent work that's happening here in Indianapolis. But then nationally, there's also a lot of sort of outreach that's happening in terms of Jewish communities for youth.
Great. Yes, it's an important reminder. You mentioned earlier the gendered elements that in our egalitarian communities are even still there. And so in other communities where halachic practice looks a little less egalitarian and a little more stringent, that can be another space that further aid and assistance is needed. So I'm glad to hear there's help with within the Orthodox community as well. I want to thank all three of you for speaking with us tonight, for sharing a bit about yourselves. I know that there are many, many, many more conversations and questions to be had, but I don't want to run too far over the time that we have allotted this evening. So I wanted to, again, thank you so much for sharing and for answering our questions and for hearing our questions as they are meant to be heard. And I want to thank everyone who logged on for listening openly and for asking your questions openly and honestly. I want to say thank you for helping us kick off Pride for this year. June, as Rabbi Dennis mentioned, is historically a Pride month in remembrance of the Stonewall history that Aaron mentioned earlier. So I want to say thank you and helping us kick off the Pride and kick off Pride Month, and hope that we can continue to build a stronger and more welcoming and brighter future. And I will pass it to Rabbi Dennis to do an official close us out.
Before I close it, Rabbi Jenny, would you say something about the Shabbat service on June 19th?
It's right here on the bottom of my notes, and I looked right past it. So I say
I'm
thank you for
looking at
helping
it from here, so I wanted to remind
you. I say thank you for helping us kick off Pride Month. But we are also having a community-wide, and I think Hannah was coordinating a meeting earlier today. We're going to have a community-wide Pride Shabbat program on June 19th at 6:15 p.m. It will be not just Beth-El Zedek, but the entire Indianapolis Jewish community joining in Pride and doing Pride and Shabbat together and holding all aspects of our community. So June 19th at 6:15 p.m. Specific details will be forthcoming, but Jackie will help us make sure that everybody knows when and where to log on. So now I will pass it back to Rabbi Dennis.
Well, let me just conclude by once again thanking Annette and Aaron and Han for this very candid and informative and empowering conversation, and to Rabbi Jenny for moderating it, and to Jackie for, as always, keeping us together and socially connected. I hope that you will want to join future Cocktail Judaism programs. There is so much happening in our community and in our city and beyond that we will try to make sure that we can bring many of those present and pressing concerns to a forum for conversation where we can all be engaged and learn and participate. I want to close, and I see that my friend Marcia Goldstone is there, and she knows that I always like to throw in a quote from my teacher, Rabbi Mordecai Kaplan. And Rabbi Mordecai Kaplan used to close or open his classes at the seminary with the following prayer that he composed. He would say, "From the cowardice that shrinks from new truths, from the laziness that is content with half-truths, and from the arrogance that thinks it knows all truth, O God of truth, deliver us." So we are here to learn from one another, to be true to ourselves, to be true to our convictions, and to our sacred Jewish values. And thank you for helping us do just that tonight. Toda Rabbah, and we'll see you around virtually and hopefully in person in the not too distant future. Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And the recording will be on our YouTube channel soon. Have a great night.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
Thank you all.